Hello, welcome back. We're back with David again. We had a great time out last time talking about just what changes are going to come up, what we need to be worried about, what's around the corner with regards to AI. We promised at the end of the last episode that we'd come back with a bit of a kind of what's the logical next step. We can't predict the future, but we can maybe give a roadway of where it's going to go and the things that we should look out for. So, David, thank you so much for joining us again. Let's dive straight in. You gave us a sneak peek at the end of last one about healthcare, predicting issues within healthcare quicker than a human, and maybe even more accurately than a human, dare we say.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not a great thing to say, but one of the biggest problems we have with human healthcare is that it's all reliant on a doctor, a general practitioner who needs to understand something like 3,000 years worth of human physiology and development, and X number of pharma companies developing drugs to handle certain things. So that amount of knowledge in one human being is a slight problem. And obviously, you're also guided by symptoms. So you only go to a doctor when you have a problem. You present the problem, but not all diseases come with the same symptoms. But they do all have the underlying causes. In particular, trying to find cancer spots. So the extra light or dark spots that appear on an X-ray scan when there's cancer present. And what they found is that the AI that's looking at the images, even on images that are not great, because most people don't know this, but when you go for a scan, they're not perfect every time. And sometimes you have to go for another scan a few days later to do exactly the same thing because they couldn't see anything on the first one because it was smudged. Even on those images that were not perfect, the AI was able to predict and find cancer to a much better level than doctors. So that there already is AI in that diagnostic tool. There are other predictors. There are people looking at heart rate and sleep patterns to see are there any variations and things that come in. And they can predict when you've got things like a common cold because your heart rate elevates slightly above what it would be resting. So if you have this slight peak, and if it's a particularly smart piece of information, it will also be looking at your exercise load and seeing if you've been exercising, which would also, it's all algorithmic and it's looking at data. But these things are already coming through, but they're coming through without this coherent, massive model of data that's present. And they're also coming through just as we're hitting these other little peaks around generative AI, around different different computational powers, the ability to actually take more data, more information, process it through. These things are always advancing, and they're not small iterative advances. These are leaps. So as you do that, as your data set becomes better, your model becomes better, your AI becomes even more advanced, even better at what it's doing. So healthcare is one massive area, and we're already seeing it starting to come in, but it's not exactly there just yet. That's going to be a major field.
Interesting. I mean, I think it's potentially worth what you were sort of talking about there. One of the ways that I just realised my face has gone like slightly blue. I put on the danger light, and now my face has gone blue. So rather anyway, the what AI ultimately is, what we call AI in its current form, at least the neural network, is it's the ultimate pattern spotter, right? So you need an awful lot of data so that you have an awful lot of patterns that is vastly greater than a human can think of. So if a human can think of, say, 5 factors that might affect something at a given time with the body, that might be heart rate, temperature, color of skin, blue, runny nose, you look at those sorts of things, you take those in and you go, okay, as a result, I think this. What an AI is able to do is look at all of those things as one great big pattern. And we're not just talking of taking that 5 things to 10 things or 20 things. Like we can have thousands of input metrics. It can be, pace of heartbeat, but it might also be what exactly the heartbeat sounds like. Maybe the heart's being a little lazy than usual. I don't know whether that's actually a thing or not. I'm not a medical expert, but pigmentation in skin. I've seen AI talked about in that it can take a photo. You can present a photo of your face, and it can give you a rough guide as to how you're doing that day based on whether you've got bags under your eyes and what your colour of your skin is. And but it can do that with such minute accuracy in a way that again a human can't. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, isn't it? It's like this pattern spotting, and then you give it all that data. So behind the increase in data and data availability, we've also got the increase in computing power coming from quantum and just larger and better tensor processing units, GPUs, etc. All of those sort of technical elements that are needed are also getting better. So we're getting better models and we're getting better data, and that's what's giving us this better outcome. So I think we've talked about medical there, and this is a real kind of obviously a sort of visceral thing. I've lost people in my life to nasty diseases that in theory in future I'm not saying that we can create immortality, but we can certainly say, hey, you might have cancer in 3 years' time. We
Well,
might.
singularity isn't too far away. Potential uploading of consciousness and downloading of consciousness into a different body is not, it's science fiction at the moment, but we are heading towards that level of computational power.
That'd be interesting. Good couple of Black Mirror episodes about that one, isn't there?
Yeah, fair few. We're back onto Doll's House again as well, which I mentioned in the last one.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, of course, this comes from the Matryoshka brain, which, as an idea, is decades old. This is. I think what's kind of interesting here is that we're talking of things and still saying, oh yeah, well that's science fiction, but it's science fiction of in some cases like 100 years ago, and what we are now is a lot closer than we were before. We may not know exactly how we're going to do it, but we kind of can see a couple of steps, and I think that's a sort of interesting step. At one point, the idea of a computer in your pocket was science fiction.
Yeah.
I've read an interesting thing. I don't know if you know. I'm a pen collector. I think last time we met, I showed you my pens. I saw something recently about it was from the 1950s, and it was to Parker Pen employees to imagine what the pen of 20 years' time would look like, and being the 1950s, their answer was it was nuclear, because everything in the 1950s was going to be nuclear. But it's really interesting that for a long time, with regards to science fiction, we've looked at things and gone, that's the future that we need, and yet now we have a stylus for your iPad that can do far more than a pen ever could, and yet Parker Pen employee of 1950 wasn't even thinking about it, and so. I like kind of where we're going with this. What is that next thing? Because I think that the next big thing to happen in AI, we talked last time about the kind of different knowledge levels of an AI. The next thing is I think layering AI. If you can, for example, take an input through a large language model that can decipher what you're saying in natural language, it can then create a set of instructions that it can give to a logical model that can work out what the sort of boundaries of the question are and how to solve it. They can then provide a logically created answer, which can then be put back through the large language model in order to present back to you in a way that you can now ingest.
So there are a couple of things that are looking into that kind of arena, because you move into more engineering, and again, it's very easy to think of AI as ChatGPT, which it isn't. ChatGPT is one very small part of AI, one very small application. But they are looking at architectural packages for buildings where you put in the requirements, you put in what the restrictions are. So a major problem for architects is they need to memorize, I think it's somewhere in the region of 85,000 building regulations, and they need to comply with all of them when they design a house. So very difficult. We're onto the doctor problem again. Enormous data set.
Job.
Yeah. So if you're a rocket engineer and you're designing something, you use computational modeling. It's all done via a computer, via advanced mathematics, and it's working out, will this thing work based on all of the variables that we can give it? That currently is detached from an input. It's all manual, built by a person to say these are the requirements that are needed, and then it's run through a program. But if a model can be built on that computation, and it can be built on something on the other side that looks at the language model coming into it, doesn't hallucinate all the time because it's got that knowledge and that understanding, suddenly designing a house, designing a building, you just need to say, well, these are the building regulations. We want it to be a contemporary building, which something like an image generating AI will understand and be able to pull enough information through. And you'll start to get these designs coming through that are mathematically workable, that will engineeringly stand up and go through all of the things that we know. And then you've got a building that works.
Mhm.
Now, there is a limitation. And you touched earlier on if sentiment analysis, where if you can take a picture of a face and it will tell you how a person's feeling. It works very well with white faces.
Mhm.
And that's a major limitation, and it's a bias that exists within a lot of AI at the moment because it's built generally by white Western people. So all of the models are built on white Western people, and all of the
Yeah, and a lot
outputs
of
for
the
the inputs.
internet's data is white Western people.
Yeah, so you end up with a bias with it's discrimination within the model itself, albeit an unintentional one, probably. I would like to think that it's unintentional.
I
Um,
certainly hope so.
yeah, but it exists. And this is one of the real dangers with AI is it's a self-fulfilling and a self um, reinforcing product. And without understanding, and this is what we touched on in the first one, AI can't have a conversation with itself. It can't question itself because it doesn't actually have an understanding of a concept. It just has a pattern recognition. And that currently will be true of numbers as well. It will just be looking at them. And although it may end up being able to actually bring mathematics into it, the reality is that's not generative AI, that's computational AI. It's these are the sequences in a calculator, and it's just a very compu complicated calculator. Nice bit of word jumble there. And all it's trying to do is run the calculations one after another, far quicker than we could do typing it into a calculator or writing it. But that's all it's doing is a computation. So it can't write its own computation. If we look at harmonic resonance, which is one of the more recent things that engineers have discovered, always existed as a physical property, but we didn't have a description for it. We didn't have a
Until the
name for
Millennium
it.
Bridge came along.
Yeah, actually, it was before the Millennium Bridge. Yeah, the Millennium Bridge engineers missed that one.
Oh,
Yeah, the big wavy bridge was in America, um,
okay.
which there was an actual road that everyone reported as going up and down as they were
Right.
driving on it, and nobody believed them until the bridge collapsed.
Right.
And it collapsed with the road literally doing waves.
Wow.
Um, yeah, yeah. The Millennium Bridge one is amazing though.
I've
Just as a
seen
complete
the
tangent.
video. Yeah.
Yeah, of people. But did you see how people start walking in a marching
In
formation?
step. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
because the harmonic resonance is an unconscious thing with us. We get in step with it as well. So everything
Absolutely.
starts to form within the harmonic resonance. It's like it's a resonance that's a wave that exists that everything aligns within to. It's like a pendulum swinging. If
Yes.
you've got the balls going, they end up in alignment with each other. It's that that's taking place. Um, yeah, but AI can't discover that. It can't necessarily say, oh, this is what's happening here. All it can do is run the current computation that exists. That we've told it, this is the parameter, this is a phenomenon, this is the mathematical version of that phenomenon. Can you please go ahead and calculate this with these components to it?
Mhm.
And that's a risk that we have with AI because if we become entirely reliant upon it, it will only ever reinforce what it knows and it doesn't have the same discovery element that we have.
Yeah, this is all really really fascinating, isn't it? In terms of this kind of next layer of understanding, I think it's really really fascinating to see where this leads, and really could be anywhere. I put you on the spot last time for a quick idea of what else is going to change. You've come up with two now. You're doing well. We've got architects there buggered, doctors are buggered. Who's next? Who's next on the David Fribbins hit list?
I'm going to throw your one out that you mentioned offline, which
Oh
is
right,
the C-suite executive, the
mm,
CEO whose ideas and vision drive a company forward. Yeah, that they're in trouble.
I think so, and it's an interesting one because I mean I think fundamentally CEOs have two jobs, right? It's to make the leading decisions. It's to set the strategy and set the idea of what the company is going to go and focus on. And second, it's to sell that to the company, keep everyone, pushing towards that, making sure that it's all going well. And, it's almost managing the team of directors. And that second one isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. I mean, you've spoken in the past about how skills with regards to bringing humans together are actually going to become more important than they ever were. And so, I suppose in that sense, CEOs still have a future. The problem is, and I think this touches on a fundamental issue with regards to AI, which could be a great topic for another one of these entirely, is that we need to start looking at accuracy of AI and compare it truly to accuracy of humans, because the reality is that humans are not very accurate. Even the greatest experts in the world are not very accurate. You've quoted to me before that the worst time to be in court is just before lunch. It is not because we choose to put cases just before lunch which have a higher proportion of guilty people. It's because the judge is hangry, and even judges are susceptible to this. And so, we've got CEOs setting strategies for companies. We've also got our ultimate AI pattern spotting machine that we talked about a minute ago, that can not just look at the 5 things that are coming down the track and compare it to its experience, but actually say something just happened over there and there and there and there and there, and 1,000 different things at once. And it can chart a path through that, which is even more, vastly more accurate than a human could ever achieve.
Yeah, and that's actually, we mentioned before about the doctors and the looking at cancer screening of X-rays. It's not 100%, but and that was the main complaint. Everyone said, "Oh, it's not 100%." Yeah, but it's like 10-15% greater than human,
Yeah.
and that's phenomenal. That intervention rate is phenomenal, and that's not about training a human to be better at spotting things. It's just this thing is better at it. Yeah, it's an interesting time, which we're probably going to say a lot on this podcast.
Yes.
I think for CEOs, there is that major threat because a CEO has to make vision and direction decisions based on the data they're receiving. And they'll have a marketing department coming to them with data. They'll have a sales department, which they may be similar things, but they'll come to them with different data that's very relevant. They'll have a technology team coming to them saying, this is what's going on. This is the next product in development. This is the next thing. A machine that can amalgamate all of that data is going to be far better and more efficient than a person could ever be. But the one weakness of a machine is it will only ever make the best aggregated decision. And the best aggregated decision means everything will end up being normalized. So every company will make the same decision for their marketing because that is the best optimal decision to make at that moment. And every one of them will do the same thing at the same time. Whereas we know from marketing that actually being different can be really useful. It can also be awful. And being able to know when it's going to work and when it's not going to work, that's more intuitive. That's that human element that I think is there. One thing AI can't do is deceive you.
Yes.
It's well, I'm not sure it ever really can deceive you.
I mean,
Because
if going back to your example in the last podcast about Facebook, if it can know your interests, know what you respond to, know what you like, and then generate new content with an intention and with a motive, then that is deception, isn't it?
no, it's pure
Okay.
because that's what it's trying to do. That is its pure intention. Yes, it looks like it, but it's not manipulation. It's not deception. It's what it's designed to do, and that's what it's designed to do. Whereas uh, one thing that we can do in conversation with each other is we can deceive each other. We can lie, and we don't necessarily need a clear-cut motive. We don't necessarily need some over it. We have that ability. We have a choice. We can be more, okay, I'm going to be really honest with you, or I can say I'm going to hold information back from you because this could play better down the line. And AI, maybe it can. Maybe it can get to that point where it can look at a person's potential outcomes and decide that actually holding back a piece of information that it can use later is better. Um, yeah, I guess. I mean, maybe actually within chess, that would be an essential thing, wouldn't it? As an AI
Yes.
beating a grandmaster, it is it deceiving the opponent, or is it just masterfully playing out of all of the moves that could possibly be played, the one that has the highest likelihood of trapping its opponent?
I think, yeah, I mean, from my sort of limited really understanding, it really is the latter there. I think the question here, and we're coming up to the end of our time, so we might have to pick it up next time. Is there a difference? Is the thing that we should be
Mm,
measuring here the intent, or is it the outcome? Because if the outcome looks the same, um, what does that look like? But I think that there's an interesting point here, which is a kind of conceptual understanding of time, which AI, ChatGPT doesn't really have. This idea that holding something back for later gain is not a
mm,
concept that current uh, AIs have. To do so, because AI can react at the speed of computation, to do so would involve understanding human brains
mm.
implicitly, and that gets crazy.
You are absolutely right. Yeah, we have past, present, and future. Three concepts all existing at once. But you are right.
Yeah,
For an AI, it's not. It's past and it's present. That's it. There is no
but
real future.
it's not even past, is it? It's knowledge and future, and that
I think
knowledge
that's
is of
mostly the
past
same.
events, but it's not. It's
I
not.
think that would be true for us, isn't it? We just have historic knowledge that that the present is the thing we exist within. The future is the thing we can affect. The past is just knowledge. We
Yes.
can't change the past. We can't affect the past. It just informs the present for future.
Yes, and yet there is an interesting element there. Gosh, we're going very sideways. There's an interesting element with regards to how poor human memory is, and how our
Mm.
feelings and reactions to things that happened in our past can actually be a long way from the truth. And
Have
so,
I told
actually,
you?
that knowledge is very fallible.
Have I told you about the Disney study on that?
You haven't. Should we save it for next time?
Oh yeah, go on then. We'll save it for next time. But the Disney study is rather fantastic.
Sounds amazing. Poor old listeners. They're going to have to wait once more. David, such a pleasure as ever. At some point, we'll come up with a name for this. It's going to be great. See you on the other side. Hello. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do like and subscribe. If you want to find out more about me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Or if you want to find out more about what Wotter's trying to achieve, then do take a look at our website. Links to both are below. Thanks so much for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you next time.